Hi collectors, welcome back to today's episode called Toy Soldier Books. If you're not reading or into buying books and material related to toy soldiers, then don't make eye contact. Slowly back out of this video and take a look at some of my other episodes because we're going to explore some of the printed material that I have acquired to help guide and inform me about toy soldiers. Notice I didn't say collected. I'm not a book collector. This is a long video, but I hope you find it worthwhile and informative. Often we find ourselves collecting in a vacuum without access to links or to other collectors or sources to ask questions, validate ideas, or just expand our knowledge about this hobby. If so, purchasing books online, at secondhand stores, at toy soldier shows, or subscribing to magazines in print or online can help you see what's out there, how to manage your collection, or where you want to go or don't want to go with your collection. All of these books I purchased online, at shows, or at secondhand bookstores. While many of them are dated, going back to the 1960s, often this is the only way to access knowledge from past collectors or current eminence grise of our hobby. It all depends on what you're looking for. These books can be cheap or expensive, but they are generally out of print, and so it's likely you won't have to pay retail. Rather, the price will be dictated by condition, rarity, and supply and demand. I've excluded resource books on uniforms, how-to, or military subjects, allowing us just to focus on toy soldiers. Maybe I'll do those other books in another episode. My first is the classic The Great Book of Britons, 100 Years of Britain's Toy Soldiers, written by James Opie of England. Opie is what I would call an eminence grise, the other being Joe Wallace and Norman Joplin. And apologies to others I have left out of this category. Opie is a prolific writer and resource to the hobby, and like the others, his CV is deep into this. I have a lot, maybe most, or one or two short of all of his books, and I am constantly referring to them. He writes almost exclusively about Britons, and if you collect these soldiers, you should have at least one of his books within reach. Opie has an active Facebook account, and Wallace and Joplin have website addresses that I will leave in the description paragraph. These next two are also by Opie. Britain's Toy Soldiers, The History and Handbook, 1893 to 2013, could be considered an update to the previous book, 100 Years. In this book, he breaks the Britain's history into several periods of time. Both books complement each other, so I wouldn't say that having one negates the other. The next book, Collecting Toy Soldiers in the 21st Century, is an overall good guide for new and experienced collectors. It focuses on the process of collecting, and Opie uses his own experiences as a template for others. I like the fact that it feels more contemporary than some of the other books I have. The Opie Britain's Toy Soldiers, 1893 to 1932, is a must if you're going to collect in this period. It is really good with lots of info and photos. I highly recommend it. It's large and one of the more expensive purchases you are likely to make, but worth finding. In this set of books, the one in the middle by Opie is interesting because it is a minor introduction into the auction side of collecting toy soldiers. I, for one, don't buy from auctions, but if you were looking at this aspect, then the middle book might be a place to start. The two books on the sides are by Norman Joplin and The Collector's Corner. And again, these are really for the neophyte in the hobby. Almost all of my collection is solid or hollow cast toy soldiers. I have a few tin figures, but I saw these two books at a show and bought them because the price was right. I enjoyed reading them, and this is what they really are, reading books. I wanted to learn more about tin figures from a historical perspective and about figures that are either no longer made or not as prevalent in North America. The book called Toy Soldiers draws from the Forbes Toy Soldier collections. It complements the Peter Johnson book you will see further on. If you can't get it at a reasonable price, you should, if not, stick with the Johnson's book. The book next to it is eye candy and relies on dioramas to depict the figures in a unique fashion. You will see in this episode I have a number of books styled along similar lines, and while some of these are really just eye candy, sometimes I will see a figure that appeals to me made by a manufacturer or maker long out of business or that I want to add to my bucket list. Now there's another episode I could do. The spiral-bound book, World Toy Soldiers, is dated and was published in 1998. It's more of a resource book that is comprised of numerous articles about makers, how-tos, and adverts of figures that are no longer available. I suppose you could call it an expanded magazine that is a snapshot of what the hobby looked like in the late 1990s. It even has an article on how to buy on this newfangled thing called the Internet or World Wide Web. Very next frontierish. These 3 books are practically antiques, but remember what I said at the beginning when I said that there is a historical knowledge that can only be tapped or accessed through books? Well, these are an example of that. These 3 books date back to the 1970s. The 2 by John Garrett are probably of more interest to those of you who purchase resin or metal castings or collect model figures. This side of the hobby is still alive and kicking, and there are some very, very good artists/collectors out there who purchase figures or do their own. This, in my opinion, is an expertise and skill beyond me, and I'm in awe of these figures when I see them at shows or online. Hence, I think the Garrett books would help fill a niche for this side of the hobby. The book on the right is okay. If I needed something to keep a campfire burning, this would be the book I'd toss in. Let me pause for a minute on these books, but particularly the 2 on each side. The first is by Opie, and I believe this was meant to accompany the book, The Great Book of Britons, at the top of this video. This I bought online and was in mint condition, never used. What it is a listing price guide of all Britain's figures made up to, I think, 1966. I use it to itemize what I have in terms of Britons, and if I was at a show, say the annual BMSS or London Toy Soldier Show or the Chicago Show, then this little book would guide me. But I caution that Opie's valuations and rarity rankings are dated, and so I wouldn't rely on them for anything but a historical context. The book by L.W. Richards, Old British Model Soldiers, 1893 to 1918, is interesting because it covers off all British makers in this period. My gripe with this book is it lacks depth, and the photos are all black and white. Really? Toy soldiers are painted in all colors, and these pics are all black and white. Really, come on, guys. For 6 pence more, you'd think that they would have done it in color. Here we have another book by Garrett, and again, this book is directed more at the community which focuses on collecting or making and painting figurines. This Opie book is also dated, but it has useful information for someone interested in getting into the hobby, and because Opie has a lot to say and share, I think anything written by him is worth having. Metal Toys is a book I picked up because it has a portion dedicated to toy soldiers, much like the Andrew Rose book coming up. Like Rose's book, it shows a diversity of toy soldiers which others don't. The Tradition book was published in 1967 and is filled with figures of Charles Stadden, and hence it is a window into what was available 55 years ago. You will see that on some books I haven't removed the price sticker for 2 reasons. I'm lazy, and as I do this episode, I see that you can see just how much I paid for some of these books. These next 2 books are interesting. The first, Toy Armies by Peter Johnson, chronicles his and his wife's work in amassing and ultimately presenting the collection of the late Malcolm Forbes. Since it is no longer possible to see the collection, this is perhaps your only glimpse into what the former billionaire collected. The other book by Andrew Rose is also a good resource book, as each page is a full-length picture of numerous toy soldiers, categorized and easy to follow. I'd recommend this given its low price and good supply on the second-hand market. Now, these are the last two English language magazines still available for subscription, although TSMF is also online. They might seem pricey, but they are both excellent sources of information about collections, collecting, how-to, background, opinion pieces, etc. Old Toy Soldiers focuses on, of course, old toy soldiers, while TSMF is for a wider audience looking for what is new on the market. While the DVD is not a book, I got it a long time ago with my TMSF subscription, and it allowed me to see the King and Country figures which were available at the time, so there's another benefit to a subscription. The book by Ruddle is dated, but still a good resource because, like Opie's books, it also provides a listing of all Britain's products, including non-soldier ones. It too has a price list, but that's not of any value these days. In this frame, I have no position on the Mackenzie book. I've read it and I had to reopen it for this video to remind myself what it was about. The other book by Stuart Asquith is dated, but it did highlight what is referred to as the New Toy Soldiers period that started in the mid-1970s to say, about 2000. Most of these were individual makers or cottage industries, and sadly, most are gone. But Asquith captures in the photos these makers' endeavors. I still use his book as a resource when I find old toy soldiers and I'm trying to figure out who was the maker and where were they located. These next two are dated. I think that over the years, other authors provide better value for the money. Richard O'Brien did these two books. They are soft cover but are filled with lots of photos, mostly black and white, and are really price and set guides. Because prices are always in flux and it's really the market which dictates what a figure is worth, I use his books to research my sets, but not for valuation. These can be a bit pricey, but they do cover a wide range of makers, just not Britons. I don't collect plastic soldiers, but I picked up this soft cover out of curiosity. If you do collect plastic, then this might be of some value to you. The other one is from the Britons Collectors Club, which I used to belong to. If you plan on collecting Britons, you may want to consider joining its club. It provides information material related to its products, and this might be of value to you if this is your pathway. This book I have already referenced in my episode called In Case of Fire. This is a coffee table book filled with a lot of information related to the history and diversity of toy soldiers. It might seem a bit dated, but I like it. Here's another coffee table book. It's only available at blurb.com, a self-publishing site. The authors did a number of these books on the early sets by King and Country. This volume has a price and set numbers for some of the sets I own. I think there are half a dozen or so volumes, but check out blurb.com if you collect early and gloss King and Country. This is similar to the one that preceded it, in that it also is available on blurb.com. It's hard to find metal shed products unless you attend a US show, but I like some of the stuff they produce, and this book was a way for me to see the products. It's another great coffee table book, and I'll leave a link in the description for blurb.com. Like Opie and Joplin, Joe Wallace is an authoritative source on old toy soldiers, and these books deal specifically with Britons. His most recent book looks at the products pre-1925. I don't have it yet, but it's one that I'll be adding to my collection. Again, very good resource books if you collect or plan to collect older Britons pieces. Wallace's website can be found in the description. This book is by Luigi Togliatti and is a relatively recent publication. In his book, he recounts his journey from a young boy in Italy to an adult, playing with and ultimately collecting and learning about toy soldiers. There is a strong emphasis on European toy soldiers and makers. If you're interested in this facet of toy soldiers, then you should find the book. It's filled with many color photos, and his style is casual and easygoing. Collecting Toy Soldiers is a book that devotes a lot of space to French-made pieces, with a few tips of the hat to other non-French makers. Its emphasis is on CBG Mignot on the metal side. Often when you see something you want, you're caught up in the moment. Do I have that piece, or do I need 4 or 3 more of this figure to complete a set? How many foot guards do I have? And this can lead to overbuying, underbuying, not buying, and if I haven't already said it, if possible, every purchase should be an informed one versus uninformed. I find that having this little book, or even an online record, will help as everyone other than me gets older or their collection grows. Well, that's it. I hope this was of some help to you. If you have any comments or questions, let me and the others know. This wasn't intended to be an exhaustive list, even if the episode was long. Thank you, and please hit the like and subscribe buttons. Until next time.